All right, we've talked about this a lot on the program, and we're going to continue to talk about it on the program. And that's what's happening in public schools across America. Last night in Loudoun County, Virginia, standing room only, parents packed the school board meeting out, the local school board meeting, in part pushing back with the removal of the PE coach that we had on the program yesterday, Tanner. He's now back into the classroom. But bigger than that was the underlying issue of the critical race theory. And they were demanding that the school board drop this indoctrination of their kids. Now, other good news, over the course of the last 30 days in April and May, the U.S. Department of Education was flooded by thousands of complaints against its push to prioritize history and civics education programs that embrace the divisive teachings of critical race theory. Most of the more than 35,000 comments oppose the department's proposed rules that uses the 1619 Project and critical race theorist teachings to guide the curriculum in American schools. Now, I want to show, before I bring in my next guest, I want to show a short clip from CNN's John Berman. No, I'm sorry. Let me go back. This is Anderson Cooper, CNN's Anderson Cooper. It aired on Monday. This was former President Obama discussing the Republican Party's response to critical race theory.
Where you would think, with all the public policy debates that are taking place right now, that the Republican Party would be engaged in a significant debate about how are we going to deal with the economy, and what are we going to do about climate change, and what are we going to do about, lo and behold, the single most important issue to them apparently right now is critical race theory. Who knew?
Well, joining me now to talk about this indoctrination is Russ Vought. He's the president of the Center for Renewing America and the former director of the Office of Management and Budget under President Donald Trump. Russ, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me back.
That's classic Democrat. They are pushing critical race theory, and when we push back, that's all they're interested in.
Yeah, Tony, it's like the person that is calling the fire department because their house is on fire, and then somehow the arsonist then says, somehow you're the problem, right?
Yeah.
They know that it's an issue. They've been pushing it for decades, and we're now caught on to it. We know the buzzwords. We're trying to educate to get it out. Parents across the country are rising up, and Obama's out there saying, this you shouldn't. There's nothing to see here, but we know that that's a sign that we're onto something.
It's a clear sign that we're onto something, because I see this in many ways as Obamacare was for the midterm elections for Barack Obama, being the catalyst that is bringing parents together in this Biden administration as he is pushing this in classrooms across the country.
I think that's true. I also think that the combination of the pandemic had something to do with this, as parents are listening to these Zoom calls about what's being taught, and they're saying, well, this is an outrageous, this is not what we signed up for, this is not America, this is not the education system that we had the benefit of going through. And so a combination of all of these things, this is a cultural moment where, I think people are realizing that the only way through the fire that surrounds us is through the fire.
Yeah.
And when we see ordinary people like the teacher having extraordinary courage, standing on the principle of truth, and knowing that that's going to lead, courage begets courage, and we're going to see more of that.
You're absolutely right. We're seeing more educators. We had one in Louisiana. We had Tanner that we just mentioned stood up here in Loudoun County speaking out against this. This is, as you said, I think it's a really good observation. The silver lining we've talked about of the coronavirus was that parents were exposed to what their kids were being taught. But then you had the Biden administration coming in, just trying to accelerate this indoctrination. And parents were already puzzled by it and concerned by it. And then they see this whole critical race theory. They see this whole LGBT ideology being pushed in schools. I mean, right now in Pride Month, the school is like a circus with the kind of stuff that they're teaching.
Yeah, the Biden administration has just basically hit the gas pedal on all of these the cultural agendas that they've been pushing behind the scenes. In my old office, the Office of Management and Budget, we do regulations, but we do all of government execution. And what Biden has basically said is every time the federal government makes a decision, we're going to consider equity, not equality, equity. Equity is leveling of society, and everything that we do in the federal government that they do is going to be with this prism that they look through.
So, Russ Vought, let's talk about, I'm encouraged, frankly, by what I see happening in schools across the country, the parents responding to the school boards, demanding answers. We see parents getting involved in actually filling school board seats in these school board elections. This is a moment to be seized. So I'm hopeful, because if we're going to fix the future, we've got to start with the present, and that means the kids that are in the pipeline to become the next generation of leaders. What can folks do to join the effort?
Sure. We have put forward a toolkit. It's at americarenewing.com. We believe that strong activism and leadership comes from knowledge and being informed on the issues. So we want people to go into battle, to go into the public arena. We know it will be hot. We know that they will be attacked, but we believe that as they have more information, and we put out an A to Z toolkit on this to be able to arm them, that they will then be able to grow their networks and be leaders. And if they can't provide accountability to the school board that they have, they can replace the school board. And I think that kind of effort is going around everywhere. But it's not just school boards. It is also county boards are doing resolutions. State legislatures are passing bans. The federal effort is a little behind the curve, but even those bills have been introduced. And I think at every level, I tell a lot of the Republicans all the time, if you're not doing something on this issue, you are missing one of the top two issues that your voters, your base is concerned about.
It is. There's actually a website that's out there that tracks what is happening with critical race theory and what's happening in state legislatures across the country, and there is quite a bit of activity. This is how our government is supposed to work, in terms of when parents get involved and they participate, legislators respond. That's what I think is the beauty of state legislatures, is they are more responsive, and of course school boards as well most of the time, responsive at the local level. And this is where people can make a difference. Absolutely.
And where the legislator will often try to get off the hook. Well, I'm not pushing critical race theory. But then they push diversity, inclusion. They use all the buzzwords of unconscious bias. When an activist, when a citizen is informed, they can then move beyond the conversation, get real accountability, get real change, and lead.
You need to be able to ask question number 2 and question number 3, because when you ask the first question, oh no, we're not doing that. Then you need to be able to probe and ask the follow-up question, and then usually, if you don't have them by the second question, by the third, you've got them pinned to the wall, and they know whether or not they're being honest with you or not.
That's exactly right.
And so they need to get those resources. Russ Vought is my guest. He's the president of the Center for Renewing America. You can find the website at tonyperkins.com, but go ahead and give it out so folks can check it out.
AmericaRenewing.com. They can get the toolkit and be armed and ready to go.
And I strongly encourage you folks to number one, know what's happening in your children's school. And it doesn't even, your kids don't even have to be in the public school for you to have an interest, because your tax dollars are paying for it. So you have a stake in what is happening in the schools in your community. Find out what's going on, organize parents, show up to these school board meetings, and ask these questions. And this is a great resource for you to use to ask those questions. And Russ, another good aspect about this, and I saw this in my political career, that a lot of people will begin in an office like school board, then they'll run for maybe the state legislature, and maybe advance on to Congress. So it's a great training ground. Not only are they doing something very helpful and meaningful, but it is a training ground for more conservatives.
Yeah, Tony, I'm often agnostic on strategy. I'm interested in building leaders. And every time someone steps into the arena with courage, that's a future leader, and that leader begets other leaders, and then we change the country and save it.
Yes, and it's great when they step into a battle, because then they're tested by fire, and we can count on them later on. And you've seen that. You've seen when individuals come to Washington, those that had not really been tested, they will often wilt under the heat of the left, because the left, it's unlike anything I've seen in my really quarter of a century in politics, is that there is a viciousness that has consumed the left that I've not seen prior to this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no one wants to be called a racist or names. No one wants to read the newspaper. And so the left, by doing that repeatedly, has overplayed their hand in such a way that American people have to rise up and say, we're going to get into the arena.
And I want to switch gears on you, and I know I'm not going to catch you off guard on this because you're on top of this issue. The Equality Act is a top priority for the Democrats. And this is one that would just torpedo religious freedom. But this is what I want to ask you about, because the Equality Act is dead on arrival for the most part. It's not going to move in the Senate. But there are those that are working to have a fallback measure that's called fairness for all, which is just as dangerous to religious freedom, but it is attracting some support from Republicans.
Fairness for All tries to have a compromise on the area of religious liberty and just say, look, if we have a statutory fig leaf and protect people of faith, basically just in houses of worship, that we can then have a compromise and provide anti-discrimination laws across the board. The problem is that it's inconsistent with reality of the differences between men and women. All of society deserves to live in a society that understands that basic reality. And people of faith live their life in society. They're not in just a church once a week or twice a week on Sunday and Wednesdays. And so this is we've got about 20 Republicans in the House, and there are senators that are going around and saying, we would like to cut a deal like this. Can you help us? In some respects, they're maligning the views of the groups that they're calling and who are saying, we're going to shut that down, we're not going to participate in that. But it's a serious threat. You have been an incredible leader on this. And we've got to get people comfortable with understanding the way reality is, and then deal with where people are hurting in society.
Right. I mean, the Equality Act is really the crown jewel for the LGBT agenda, because it basically, everything they want, they get it in one piece of legislation. But it's not just them, it's the abortion industry as well, because that will give, based on sex and identity, every female, well, I guess a male too if he wants an abortion, based on their thinking. But this would, as you said, torpedo religious freedom, or as I said, religious freedom. But I think there's a very important point to make when we look at fairness for all. As you said, it carves out, provides this fig leaf for religious institutions. But Russ, as you've made note of, our First Amendment freedoms are not to institutions. Those are to Americans.
That's exactly right. People of faith live and work in society. They order their life accordingly. That's what we mean by being able to practice their faith. But again, it's not just people of faith. Why is it that a person that has not been a member of a particular religious faith can't go to Target and be able to ensure that their daughter can go to the bathroom without having some tension in the back of their neck as to whether their daughter is safe?
Yeah, to me, this is one of those areas there's no compromise. I mean, you can't compromise over the safety and security of your children. You can't compromise over the ability to live your life according to your faith and to teach that to your children. There can be no compromise.
No, and I think that's what you and I and others are trying to communicate to the Senate and to those 20 Republican members is, we want to help educate you. We want to help bring you along. We understand where cultural is, but you just can't go there.
Yeah. Russ Vought, I want to thank you for coming in the studio today and joining us. Russ, president of Center for Renewing America, working on some really, really important issues. Love to work with you guys. Grateful for the work that you do, and we look forward to seeing more and more school boards impacted by your work as we work in tandem with you to push back on this critical race theory.
Thanks for having me, Tony.